Ready to swap those grocery store veggies for something a little wilder?
I am.
Me too. Today we're going on a deep dive for wild garlic and wild onion.
Sounds delicious.
It does, doesn't it? We're taking a look at this guide that someone sent in, all about how to tell these two plants apart in the wild, how to use them safely, and of course, how to make them into something tasty.
These two are fascinating because they really show how foraging is about way more than just what you see.
Oh, interesting.
It's about using all your senses.
I like that. So the guide really stresses how important that crush and sniff test is. Honestly, it seemed almost too easy to me, but they say it's the best place to start.
It's true. Looks can be deceiving, especially with plants. But that smell, that's a dead giveaway. You get that big whiff of garlic. That's wild garlic. Smell like an onion.
Well,
You've probably found yourself a wild onion.
makes sense.
It seems obvious, but it's really important for not mixing them up with plants that could be dangerous.
Like that thing they mentioned about wild garlic being called bear's garlic. Apparently, bears go straight for it after they wake up from hibernating, almost like a detox.
Yeah, like a little after hibernation cleanse.
It's kind of a funny thought.
It is a funny thought, and you know what? There might be something to that. Wild garlic is supposed to help get your digestion going and is good for your liver.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder if maybe the bears are onto something.
That's a good point. I never thought about it like that.
It really shows how people have been watching nature for a long time to figure these things out.
It makes you realize there's a lot more to these plants than you might think. But for those of us who like to learn by seeing, what should we look out for?
The shape of the leaf is the next big clue.
Okay.
Wild garlic has these wide, flat leaves, almost like a tiny lily pad.
I see.
Wild onion is different. It has rounder leaves, and they're hollow, kind of like chives or a scallion.
So it's like the leaf's shape can tell you the best way to use it in a dish.
Exactly.
Wow.
Those broad wild garlic leaves are going to work really well for things like pesto because you want that smooth texture. But the wild onion with its thinner leaves would be great for something like a garnish, or if you want to add a little bit of oniony crunch.
I love that about foraging. It's like you're finding all these hidden uses for these plants. Like you might walk right past them every day, but once you know, you know.
Exactly. It totally changes how you see things. And speaking of things you might not know, did you know that you can eat the entire wild garlic plant? The leaves, the flowers, even the bulb, it's all edible. With wild onions, it's mostly the leaves you're after, but you can eat the bulb too.
Seriously, the whole thing. That's amazing.
It is.
It's like these plants are full of secrets just waiting for us to discover them. And speaking of secrets, the guide mentioned that Native Americans used wild onions not only for food, but also for medicine. What's that all about?
Yeah, wild onion has a really interesting history as medicine.
Really?
Native Americans used it for all kinds of things, like if they had a cough or a cold or an upset stomach.
Wow.
They even made like a paste out of it to put on wounds to help them heal.
That's amazing. It really makes you think about what other secrets these plants might be hiding. We're always so focused on what we can eat, but maybe we've forgotten about how plants can be medicine too.
Right. It's a whole other side of foraging that I think deserves a closer look.
Definitely. So we've talked about how to tell them apart and a little bit about the history, but this guide also says you can sometimes use wild garlic and wild onion in place of each other in recipes. That seemed kind of confusing to me. Can you explain that a little more?
Oh, sure, yeah. It depends on how strong you want the flavor and the texture you need.
Okay.
Wild garlic is a really strong garlic flavor,
Yeah.
Although it's milder than the garlic you'd buy in the store, it's still pretty strong. Wild onion has a much more delicate flavor. It's more like a hint of onion. So if you have a recipe where you want that light onion flavor, like a spring mix salad, or if you just want a little bit of onion as a garnish, that's where you'd use wild onion.
I see. So you probably wouldn't want to use it for something like French onion soup.
Right.
Okay.
You need that strong onion flavor for something like that. On the other hand, if you're making pesto, where you really want that garlic flavor to come through, you would want to use wild garlic.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we've talked about flavor, but what about the texture?
Oh, right. You said that was important too.
It is. Remember how wild
Yeah.
garlic has those big, wide leaves?
Yeah.
They fall apart really easily, so they make a nice, smooth paste.
Uh-huh.
So it's great for pesto, but also for adding to soups or sauces to make them thicker.
I see.
Wild onion, because it has those thinner leaves, it's better for garnishing, like chives, or to add a little crunch, like to a frittata, or if you're stir frying.
Oh, that's a good idea. So it's not just about how it tastes, it's about how the plant itself feels in the food.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And, the guide has some really cool suggestions for how to use these, especially the wild garlic. I'm a big fan of pesto myself, so I was really happy to see they have a wild garlic pesto recipe.
Yeah, me too. I love pesto.
It's so good. And wild garlic gives this unique flavor that you just can't get from store-bought garlic.
I bet. The guide also said you can use it on pasta, fish, even grilled veggies.
Yeah.
What about wild onion?
Let me see. Oh, one thing that looked good to me was pickled wild onion.
Pickled wild onion.
Yeah. They said it's good on sandwiches, burgers, even a charcuterie board.
Now, that's something I would never have thought of. This is what I love about learning about wild edibles. It makes you think about food in a whole new way. It's even better when you think about how wild garlic and wild onion grow near each other, which means there's so many cool ways you could use them together.
It does.
Talk about a forager's dream. Actually, the guide even mentions using both plants together.
Oh, yeah.
What would you put them in together? What kind of flavors go well together?
Well, there are a lot of possibilities. You could make a frittata with both wild garlic and onion. That'd be really good. You'd get both flavors.
Yeah.
Or you could make a spring mix salad and put the wild garlic leaves in there and then some really thinly sliced wild onion.
That sounds so refreshing.
Right. With a light vinaigrette, it would be delicious.
Now I'm getting hungry. I love the idea of putting these two together. But before we get too carried away with all the yummy food, we should probably talk about safety. The guide specifically mentions lily of the valley as something that can be dangerous and easy to mix up with wild garlic.
That's right. Got to be safe, especially when you're out there picking things yourself.
Definitely. And lily of the valley, that's one that can really trick you.
Again.
Yeah, it likes to grow in the same places as wild garlic, and it pops up around the same time of year, too.
Oh, no. So how do you make sure you're picking the right one?
That's where that crush and sniff test is so important.
Makes sense.
Lily of the valley doesn't have that strong garlic smell at all.
Right.
Actually, it smells kind of sweet.
Interesting.
So if you're ever not sure, just trust your nose.
Good advice. If it doesn't smell like garlic, don't take the risk.
Better safe than sorry. This has been an amazing deep dive. It's crazy how much there is to know about just these two plants. We've covered so much: how to tell them apart, how to use them in cooking, even their history, and how they can be medicine.
It really shows how much foraging connects us to nature. And not just in one way. It's about finding food, yeah, but it's also about understanding how plants connect to history and even how we use our senses to experience the world around us.
I like how you put that. It's like these plants are a connection to the past. They remind us how much our ancestors knew about nature. So before we wrap up, what's the one thing you really hope people take away from this?
I'd say it's to remember that foraging, when you do it with curiosity and respect, it's not just about picking plants, it's about discovery. So get out there, open up your senses, and see what you can find.
Love it. Who knows, maybe you'll find your new favorite recipe or even stumble across an old-time remedy, all thanks to wild garlic and wild onion. Happy foraging, everyone!